Welcome one, welcome all. Thank you for tuning in to Cedarly Radio, your guide to films playing at the Art House for the week of February 1st to February 7th. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Dave Huffman. On this week's episode, we'll be discussing Pawel Pawlikowski's Cold War and Peter Jackson's They Shall Not Grow Old.
We'll also be discussing Ted Bundy on film, trying to find hidden classic films on streaming services, the Screen Actors Guild Awards, and we will check in with Plain Dealer arts and culture reporter Laura DeMarco on Cleveland movie theater history and her thoughts on the year of film that was 2018. We always like to start off the show with the last scene first, because we're a little backwards that way. So, Dave, what is the last film you've seen?
The last movie I saw was truly an American, well, I guess British classic, The Third Man, Carol Reed's, 1949 film noir, post-war, set in Vienna thriller. It's just such a great movie and just gorgeous looking, and I just hadn't watched it in a long time.
I'll say this is what viewing for you then, because that's...
Actually, I don't think I've seen it that many times. Okay. Maybe only like 4 or 5 times.
I think you mentioned on the show before, because you said you went to the museum.
Went to the museum. Yeah, went to the museum in Vienna, and we were just looking for... I wanted to watch a classic movie, and it was popped up streaming, and I was like, let's watch that.
That was my follow-up question, was there's been discussion of like... with the death of Filmstruck, where do you go for a classic screening of classic films that are streaming?
Yeah, I'm waiting.
You have to search for them.
I'm waiting for the Criterion channel to pop back up, which is going to be Filmstruck 2.0.
Right.
But right now, I think that was actually on. I think it might have even just been on Netflix. It was either on Netflix or Amazon Prime.
Well, I found that they are there. You just really have to. You can't just casually run across them. You kind of have to know what you're looking for and search it out on purpose.
There's not a ton of them on there, to be honest with you. But I think maybe because they did the new Orson Welles film that they thought let's have let's get some other ones. Classic ones. Sure. So that was my theory.
That is a good move.
And what is the last film you've seen, Aaron?
So. We'll talk about it more next week because Sundance is going on right now, the Sundance Film Festival. So I was reading up on that, and one of my favorite documentarians, Joe Berlinger, has got a movie playing at Sundance this year called Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, which I had to write down because I cannot keep that name in my head.
So I won't be able to use that title for my autobiography.
Well, if you want to be conflated with the story of Ted Bundy, then sure, but probably not.
Yes.
But it's a fiction film he did with Zac Efron, Lily James, and Haley Joel Osment. It's more from his wife's point of view. Anyway, so the preface to that was he put out a documentary about Ted Bundy called Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy Tapes,
I watched on Netflix. I binge watched it over the weekend,
and that was what I did, and that was the last thing I've seen, because I really like his approach. He did the Childhood Murders, Robin Hood Hills, the Paradise Lost trilogy, and did Blair Witch 2 as a director, one of his fiction outings, which I still like, even though I'm totally aware it's a bad movie. So I was interested, he's got a documentary I can watch right now. So I did, and I really liked it. The parallel structure of like a 1980s investigation mixed with Ted Bundy's actual words and his 1970s, horrifying acts of murder and mayhem. I was really pretty engaged by it, and it worked really well as a companion with the other Netflix film Manhunter, the David Fincher series that I've watched all the way through a couple times now. They kind of gave a bit more interesting background of what the way police procedures worked in that time period, where nobody talked to each other because why would you? And there was that's what the FBI was for.
There was
National
no internet connecting everybody. There was no big database to find these things. And
so something like that just slips through the cracks and is horrific. It's pretty
I
intense.
had not remembered all the details of him, and in my mind I just remember him in Florida and forgot about all of the early where he started was out west and had escaped, and it's such a tragedy that all those other women died because basically someone wasn't paying attention and he escaped twice. So he was a wily evil person.
The buzz this week at the Art House, we opened Stan and Ollie, which people are just charmed by, the regulars that we talked to. There was the usual thing where people just saw, it's a Oliver Hardy, Stan
Laurel
and Hardy movie. That was enough to get some people out, and then they were like, "Oh, I kind of was like I mentioned last week, I was expecting the full biopic, the funny parts, the height of their careers, the 107 films they did together." But nobody that came out of it was like, "Oh, it's terrible." They were like, "Oh my god, it's so charming. It's a little bittersweet, but such a great movie." And there was mostly universal comments of I can't believe nobody was nominated. These guys are great together.
Yeah, it is. I'm surprised too, especially since this isn't, like we've been saying, the strongest year for some of the male performances.
Correct,
in films, that I think there could have been space for one of them to be nominated.
Yeah.
But
you mentioned, because John C. Reilly, I kept forgetting, was nominated for a Golden Globe. best
comedy
actor.
Yeah, he was nominated for Golden Globe, and
so some people are paying attention.
Yeah, and then for a BAFTA. So for
one for each.
Yeah, one for each. So, but
Coogan gets his country, and Johnson Reilly gets his country.
It did seem a little although it is the Foreign Press Association.
That's true.
Nominating him here for John C. Reilly, but yeah, Steve Coogan did get nominated.
Luckily,
they
were able to look past his Holmes and Watson performance and be like, no, he can do really, really good things.
But speaking of the Oscars,
I'll say the main buzz this weekend was the bumps in the Oscar nominations. That the films that were showing that just all of a sudden The Favorite is back in a big theater, and we're getting out 100 people to see certain shows for that. It's that weird juggling act where you're trying to put the right theater or to the right size theater with the right movie, and guess what people are going to catch up with first.
Yeah,
and The Favorite and Green Book were definitely the main two.
You think a lot of people, now that it's gotten tied for the most nominations, a lot of people are finally going, I do want to see The Favorite. Even though
that's what most of the buzz was. Was either, there was people that were like, I'm seeing it again because I'm glad it's on the big screen, and it's like, well, we've never lost it. It's been playing this whole time.
It's my number one movie. I'd highly encourage people to see it multiple times. It's great.
It's one of those mixed bags where I'm not generally a huge Oscar buff or Oscar fan, but I love that it gets everybody wanting to talk about movies, and that weird thing where it's the horse race aspect to it of which one's better. And one regular was just I can't believe Roma got all these nominations. I fell asleep during it. I was so bored. It's well, you got to pay attention, as is the case with every movie.
And I know that Green Book expanded nationally to a lot more theaters. We opened it up in several other locations here in Cleveland as well.
True.
And it still continues to go very strong here at the Cedar Lee.
I wrote down some of the percentage increases nationwide for these movies, and
that one's outrageous.
I'll run them off real quick because they're basically pointless to the point of comedy here. Green Book went up 153%. Favorite went up 211%. And the one that cracked me up was Can You Ever Forgive Me, which returned to the theater and got out quite a crowd with only one show a day, increased 765%, but it pretty much wasn't in theaters at all. So it was one of those.
It was only in maybe
that's skewed.
Yeah, a handful of theaters last week,
and now it's bumped back
out there.
But then Vice was interesting to me. That only went up 4.6% nationwide, of course. But
that's the one I'm still surprised it ended up getting a Best Picture nomination, because I think that people aren't as passionate about it.
Right.
And considering how the nominations are, where it's really weighted, it has to be ranked as number one on people's list for it to get a nomination.
Right.
So that means that many people had to say that was my favorite movie of the year.
Right.
So
and it was a pretty sizable hit. We had it over the Christmas holiday, and people were coming out and
people were liking it,
enjoying it.
And then on the flip side of that, if you want to talk about films that did not get an Oscar bump, films that were sort of hoping to get an Oscar nomination, the Nicole Kidman movie Destroyer, which we had been playing a trailer for here for a while and had the poster up for a while, but now when the nominations came out and it did not get its nomination for her, they've kind of rethought their release strategy for it, so it won't be opening here at the Cedar Lee, but we are going to be opening it this Friday the 1st at Chagrin Cinemas and Tower City Cinemas, so you will have a chance to see that, and I would encourage you to check it out because it is a great performance.
I've read a lot about the cinematography there too, where that definitely feels like a big screen experience to have there as well.
It's just a great, police thriller drama.
Cops and robber.
Yeah, it's a very good film. She plays an undercover cop who has just kind of burned out her entire life by dedicating her life to the force. It's a role that would normally be played by a man. Like traditionally, you would see that character as a male character,
the grizzled, hard-boiled. Yeah.
But she is great in it. So I would encourage you to go see it.
We have one Oscar correction on last week's show when we were discussing our first initial reactions. We were talking about Roma being nominated for Best Picture, and that foreign film has never won Best Picture. Foreign film has won Best Picture, but it wasn't a true foreign language film. It was The Artist, which was a French production about old Hollywood.
You're splitting hairs. You're correct. We were speaking of foreign language films.
Right.
I'm sorry.
So there's no language in there, but technically, a silent French film did win Best Picture.
But yes, a subtitled foreign language film has not won.
And I did enjoy that movie at the time, but it does seem like that falls in that category you mentioned, where people are going to be talking about that in a few years, and
it might be the kind of film that people rediscover at some point and remember how charmed they were by it, because it is charming. It's a charming, really great movie, and it's one of those films that just kind of captured the moment. People that make movies love movies about movies.
Well, that was also Weinstein Company or Miramax, whatever it was at the time. So He Who Should Not Be Named was great at the Oscar campaigning.
He sure was.
Getting wins for movies, which we've talked about before, that we're like, really? Shakespeare in Love?
Yeah.
All right.
I know.
You
still defend Shakespeare in Love.
Some of the early indicators we've been mentioning throughout the life of this show have been the other awards that are handed out, usually the different organizations. The SAG Awards handed out their awards this past weekend. So, Dave, tell me if this gives you any indication as to what is going to win at the Oscars.
This is the kookiest Oscar year ever.
We've got Outstanding Performance by Female Actor in a Supporting Role, Emily Blunt.
Who's not even nominated for an Oscar. So I don't think that's going to impact the Oscar race.
Great role, though. And one of those, like,
she was great.
I love her as an actress.
And she was expected to get a nomination. And then I forget the actress's name from Roma.
Right.
Really kind of came in and kind of
plays the mother.
Quote unquote stole her slot. So
Mahershala Ali, Green Book, best performance by an actor in a supporting role.
I think it's looking like he's the shoe in there.
Yeah, that seems to be it's rolling
Which
that way
makes me
for
sad
him.
because I would rather have Richard E. Grant.
True. Rami Malek for best performance by a lead actor for Bohemian Rhapsody. We've already discussed that.
I think that he and Christian Bale are the two frontrunners. Probably
like
a slight edge to Rami Malek at this point.
Which is interesting because is it maybe because it's first time for Rami Malek? And I mean, people have known who he is for a little while, but it's a big showy...
The only thing that's going to hurt him is any kind of, there's a little bit of bad taste in people's mouth over Bryan Singer. And, but of course, he was fired from the movie, and Rami Malek still ended up getting an Oscar nomination.
That's true. And Rami Malek's on the record, I guess, is saying, like, he was very vocal, like, he's not directing this movie. He's absent on the set. We need somebody else in here. So it does seem like he's kind of attached to that project as, like, he willed it to, completion. So also, I think he's producer on that one, too.
He maybe,
his first early producing credits. And then outstanding performance by a female actor in a leading role, Glenn Close for The Wife. And then the category, which we've mentioned before, that feels like instead of doing a best popular film at the Oscars, they should do an ensemble.
Yes.
Because that seems like that's kind of been a problem throughout the years nominating, including The Favorite this year. You've got two supporting actresses battling each other out to win the award, which might just sort of cancel it out. So Black Panther took home the ensemble this year for the SAGs.
Sort of their Best Picture award.
Oh, I never thought about it that way.
Interestingly enough, The Favorite wasn't nominated for Best Ensemble.
I was going to say.
And we're saying but three of the performers were nominated for Oscars. So the SAGs this year are really a head scratcher as far as if they're going to mean anything for Oscars.
I feel like that's the theme of all the previous awards that have come out and all the early
I
buzz.
Like it because it actually might be interesting this year when you watch the Oscars as opposed to just, this film is going to win, this film's going to win. You don't know for every one of these. It's great.
Or is it all just big manipulation in order to get more ratings for the Oscars?
It could be. It's all part of the Hollywood conspiracy.
And we will be right back with the new films opening this week.
And this week for our special events, we've got our continuing Melt Bar and Grilled Late Shift film series with Mean Girls playing Saturday, February 2nd at 9:30 and midnight, and Sunday, February 3rd at 7 o'clock. This is, of course, the classic comedy written by Tina Fey, featuring Tina Fey, and starring Rachel McAdams and a pre-meltdown Lindsay Lohan. And then we also have our monthly showings of Rocky Horror Picture Show. That's Saturday, February 2nd at midnight, and that features a live floor show by a resident cast, the Simply His Servants.
It's still weird to me that Tina Fey has only written that one movie.
It is strange.
I mean, she's definitely a comedy writer and 30 Rock and everything else, but like only one feature film so far.
And it's a great one, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We also have Fathom Events and Aniplex are presenting I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, which is one of my nominations for greatest film title of the year. It is a anime adaptation of a novel, which was published as like a web series, serialized. I don't know. Look up the Wikipedia entry for this one. It's a fascinating story because there's a live action movie from last year that came out called Let Me Eat Your Pancreas, and it's very popular overseas in Japan. It's coming to America now finally in the anime version, I Want to Eat Your Pancreas. It'll be playing Thursday, February 7th at 7 p.m.
And this Friday, on February 1st, we're going to be opening up the Oscar-nominated film Cold War, which is directed by Pawel Pawlikowski, who previously won an Oscar for his film Ida. And this film is a drama about a turbulent love story between a music instructor and sort of a star pupil, and the love affair that they have that's on again, off again, that goes between communist Poland and France.
serduszka, 4 oczy. Ojojoj. Co płakały we dnie w nocy. Ojojoj. Czarne oczka, co płaczecie, że się spotkać nie może.
This is that trailer that customers keep mentioning because we've been playing it for quite a while,
right.
At least through the holiday season, a month or so. That the jazzy score that everybody just heard is how the trailer starts off, and people just like they hum it, like it's already stuck in their head. And several people are like, I just can't wait to see it because like the music's gonna be great. And I was like, yeah, it should be. It's
yep, it is.
It is.
It's a great song. It's a beautiful movie. It was in one of my top 5 films of the year. I would really encourage people to come see it in the theater. It's really just a gorgeous film with incredible cinematography. It's Oscar nominated for its cinematography, its direction, as well as Best Foreign Language Film. So it's unusual for a foreign language film to get so many nominations in most years. Of course, this year we have 2 of those exceptions,
exactly.
where we have Roma as well as this one, both black and white foreign language films kind of cleaning up a lot at the Oscars this year.
Which is interesting you say that because Ida was another, you said he won Best Foreign Language Film a few years back for Ida, and that was a black and white film as well. And I was reading up a couple interviews with Pawlikowski about this movie, and he had every intention to shoot it in color originally, but I couldn't find in any interviews where he mentioned like why he had changed it.
I don't know, but I'm glad he did because it's gorgeous. I mean, it really is. The photography is amazing in it, and I would say that the performances are really compelling as well, but just visually, it's just, I think that's the thing that stuck with me the most from this film, and it just has a great kind of sadness to it. I mean, it is definitely not a feel-good hit, right? It's a wonderful tragic story.
Just the trailer alone just has all the trappings of just like classic art house foreign film, depressing, very somber, serious movie.
In some way, it's ripe to be like kind of parodied very quickly, like on SNL or something. You could do that, and it just shows what artistry he has. That he takes all these things that should be kind of terrible, cliches of foreign language films, makes them black and white art house, stuff, and it's just a beautiful movie. And in any other year, if it weren't for Roma, this would be the film that would absolutely win Best Foreign Language Film and potentially other Oscars as well.
And then a couple weeks ago when we had Mike went on from the Greater Cleveland Film Commission, he mentioned this is the movie he was looking forward to this year, and it has that 1:7 aspect ratio, the old Academy aspect ratio. So when you see the movie, yes, it is supposed to be pretty much a straight box on the screen.
Yes, it is a square.
The framing, you'd mentioned, because it was your number 2 when we did our foreign films of the year, I think. You were mentioning how it's like the use of the frame and how it can isolate a character or bring a whole crowd together.
Yeah.
I've seen all but one of his other movies, and the cinematography, well, I know Ida, the cinematography does stand out. Again, a black and white, really sharp, crisp, whites, deep, rich blacks in that one. But his other films I've seen, Last Resort and Woman in the Fifth, neither one of those stuck out to me as being like
they're functional.
Visual. They're good. Yeah, they're fine. Actually, Woman in the Fifth was so in my opinion. I didn't care for the kind of ghost story element to it, but Last Resort is really, really good. And but it didn't stand out visually. It was just like there was solid story and great direction. Like it seems like he's very well at very talented director of actors.
And Cold War, in addition to opening here at the Cedar Lee, is also going to be playing at Chagrin Cinemas and the Capitol Theater, so you have a couple other locations to see it at.
Also opening this week, I guess we can say officially backed by popular demand.
It legitimately backed by popular demand.
Is They Shall Not Grow Old, in both the 2D version and the 3D version from director Peter Jackson. This is his first documentary, I want to say, as a director.
I'll say yes.
He did a parody documentary years ago called Forgotten Silver, which was a really, really fun, kind of like his version of a Christopher Guest movie. So look that one up if you're a Peter Jackson fan. But this is, of course, his documentary we've shown 4 times now as a special event that is restored World War I footage with never before seen footage that he painstakingly colorized and dimensionalized. Well, he doesn't colorize the whole thing. I guess there is some examples of like, here's what it did look like. So you get kind of a making of comparison within the film. So you want to check the showtimes depending on if you want the 2D or the 3D. You've seen it in 3D.
I saw it in 3D, yes.
And I mean, you can rerun your previous conversations about this, but you were raving about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think if you, unless you're one of those people that just hate seeing things in 3D, which I don't understand those people. Some people say it gives them a headache, to which I say, if you're not looking at the screen right then, you need to just stare.
It can mess with your vestibular system. So some people, I think it's a very minority group of people out there, but yeah, there's the 2D option if you want to see it.
I also have a friend that only has monocular vision, so she can't see a 3D movie no matter what. So, then she feels gypped, but if she has to pay for 3D, and she's like, I can't even see it in 3D. But it is a film that he obviously wanted people to see in 3D, or else he wouldn't have bothered to do it. So I would encourage you to come see it in 3D if you can, and that showtime works out for you. We are giving people the option, though, to see it in 2D, but it does add a very compelling depth to it. It's not the kind of 3D where stuff's flying off the screen at you. It is about adding depth to the image, and that is used to great effect.
So this being a hugely popular documentary special event we've done.
It was insane.
Like I said, 4 times now.
Right.
And a multi-generational. It was like there were young kids coming out with their parents. There were, elderly, World War II veterans that were coming out to it. Again, this is a World War I documentary, not II. But those folks aren't really around with us anymore because
we don't have it's
just been too long now.
Mm-hmm.
There's the idea of it's so beloved and it's such an amazing work of filmmaking and it's an achievement of filmmaking that why wasn't it nominated for Best Documentary this year? Because it seems ripe for one of those things. It's a respected filmmaker who's already won an Oscar, won several Oscars.
And it's up for a BAFTA this year for Best Documentary.
So we did a little bit of research, and there's a filing date. You have to have your submission into the Academy by October 1st for documentaries.
And they just missed the deadline.
So we're... Don't know if it might be next year, but either way, it's still something that you should not be missed on the big screen, especially with that third dimension added to it.
And it's one of those strange things that, it's released by Warner Brothers, which is a major studio, and Warner Brothers used to have a division of their company that handled specialty films.
Right.
And we used to play a lot of Warner independent films here.
Yeah.
But that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So they just don't know what to do with a little film like this anymore. So I think that's why they partnered up with Fathom and just figured, well, we'll just kind of throw it out there. And, just showing it in any way will be fine. And the demand for it just, I think, knocked everybody's socks off. So they were not expecting it at all. And that's why the studio rethought their strategy completely. And now it is just opening up for regular engagement. So please come back and see it.
Which I am thrilled they did because it should stop all the phone calls of when will you bring this movie back?
Exactly.
And be like, it's back.
It's back.
Go watch it. That's fine. And we'll be right back with our special guest this week for our Cedar Lee 3 segment. Plain Dealer arts and culture reporter Laura DeMarco will be talking about some Cleveland movie theater history and her thoughts on the film year that was 2018. Coming up this Saturday, the Met Live is back with Carmen on Saturday, February 2nd at 12:55 p.m. And the encore show will be Wednesday, February 6th at 6:30 p.m.
And also this week we have Trafalgar Releasing and the Music Center presents Joni 75, a birthday celebration on Thursday, February 7th at 7 o'clock p.m. This was filmed at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles, and it's a tribute to Joni Mitchell's 75th birthday, featuring an incredible lineup of artists, including Seal, James Taylor, Norah Jones, Diana Krall, Chris Christopherson, Graham Nash, and a whole bunch of others. So I would encourage people to come and see that. It is just that one night only, and actually tickets are flying off the shelf for that one. So it's very likely that could be a sold-out show. So I'd encourage you to get your tickets in advance.
And we are back with our Cedar Lee 3 segment for this week's episode. If you've been listening the last few weeks, we've been discussing the year of film that was 2018 from different people throughout the Cleveland film community. And this week we have on Laura DeMarco, who's the arts and culture reporter for the Plain Dealer, and also the author of Cleveland Then and Now and Lost Cleveland, both fantastic Cleveland history books. Hello, Laura.
Hey, thanks for having me. So fun to be at the Cedar Lee in the middle of the day.
Early hours before the public can.
Yes, very special.
I wanted to ask real quick, just based on you do a lot of Cleveland history reporting and writing, any interesting Cleveland movie theater history or how the scene has sort of evolved over the years? Yeah,
there really is. Because before TV, before internet, what did people do for entertainment? They went out. So we had so many great theaters in Cleveland. And, of course, the most famous theaters are Playhouse Square. And a lot of people don't realize that for decades, those were primarily movie theaters. They did other things. They had vaudeville and stage shows and always, but, they were movie theaters. And, when those were built, they were built in the 1920s. They were just theaters. They were beautiful theaters. There's 7 of them. But they took on so much more importance over the years. And the reason why is because, Cleveland fell into a really down time in the 60s. I mean, there was a massive loss of population and jobs. And and everything. So people stopped going to the theaters downtown, to the Playhouse Square and also to the Hippodrome across the street. And they really kind of fell on hard times. By the 70s, those gorgeous theaters were slated for demolition, where people had seen, Sound of Music and Wizard of Oz and all sorts of great things. And it's I think the most wonderful arts success story in the city of Cleveland history is that thanks to arts activist Ray Shepardson and, Laney Hayden and the women of the Junior League, they got together and they said, we cannot lose these theaters. And they raised funds and money, and Ray did this by raising awareness. He put on Jacques Brel's Alive While Living in Paris for close to 600 performances in the decaying state lobby. And it actually worked. We could have parking lots down there. And instead, thanks to these two people, these theaters have been restored. They're the biggest performing arts complex outside of New York City. And I love that story because it shows how the arts and theaters and things like that can really transform a city too, because today that's really credited with kind of the birth of the Renaissance of downtown Cleveland. Sadly, across the street, the Hippodrome, which was said to be even more beautiful than all those theaters, is today a parking lot.
Right.
Because its owner did not see the importance of restoring these theaters. So I think that's just great that theaters could have such a great impact on a city.
And also be such an interesting rallying point when, if you can get the word out, the community really comes together and is like, no, we do need to actively participate and save this.
It was totally grassroots. I mean, it was just guy putting on a play there, and these some of the most famous actors kind of in Cleveland history, performing in it, and people going down in the lobby. I love to look at the old pictures because everybody's in their bell bottoms and their long hair, and they're like the coolest 70s people, in the crowd.
I had no idea that was slated for demolition ever, because our family moved here in '88, and it was the cultural institution that it is. It's even more so today. Yeah. But that's crazy that it was almost gone.
They were all closed, but one at one point. So you had these big hulking empty theaters just rotting down there. Yeah.
Well, and obviously our company, with Cleveland Cinemas, operating a lot of historical theaters. Obviously the Cedar Lee that we're sitting in right now.
Very much so. Yeah.
But the Capitol Theater, which over on the west side, which had sat empty and rotting for decades, from the mid 80s until about 10 years ago now, like that. And the Apollo out in Oberlin is another one of ours, which I believe is the oldest continually operating movie theater, at least in Northeast Ohio. It's over 100 years old. It's always been a movie theater. It's never closed, except for when it closed for a couple of months for renovations and things. But it's, always been showing movies for over 100 years. And, that's just part of our history in our theater, or our company.
Yeah, a lot of times when I talk about the books, I talk about how I was inspired by my family, because I'm a third-generation Clevelander, and my grandmother actually, who was born in 1912 in Cleveland. One of her stories was about working at the Capitol back in the day. That was one of her. As a teenager, she worked at the Capitol Theater, so that would have been a very long time ago.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, we'll get a regular in here that will stop you in the lobby and be like, you know what? My favorite one was a guy, John. I forget his last name. He was a pin setter. He's like, I used to be a pin setter downstairs. And I was just giving this blank look like, I don't know what that is. And he's like, well, first of all, there used to be a bowling alley downstairs.
Right.
And I guess as a kid, or hopefully, legal working teen, in the bowling alley, when
the
they
laws were very different back then.
Very different back then. That he would be the guy kid who would reset the pins for bowling to keep going. He said he just kind of hung up in the back there, and the balls come down. You avoid the balls and then reset the pins. It's like, wow.
There's one theater in Cleveland. One bowling alley in Cleveland where that still happens. Maple Lane's down in St. Clair Superior. Yeah.
Oh, really?
So some short person or kid has to do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Now I want to go
been there
bowling
ever?
there. No, I've never been bowling in that one.
It's a great old bar. The above the bar is a vintage Lily St. Cyr picture. So it's a very cool place.
Well, I definitely want to go because I love an old bowling alley where you still have to where you actually have to
write down
score
your
yourself as opposed to having the computer do it.
Yes.
Because I'm sure if they have a kid manually doing the pins, they probably don't have a computer system sophisticated enough for the sensors to know which pins you've knocked down, and the kid probably doesn't yell out. And that'd be great though if he did. So
we are now a week out from the Oscar nominations. Did you have any snubs or films you were really happy to see getting some attention, or films that you wished got some more attention or love?
I thought it was a pretty good class this year. I was really happy to see Roma and The Favorite get so many nominations. Those were two of my favorite films of the year. Really I thought Roma was just such a beautiful film, and The Favorite was just so witty and delightful. And I also thought it was good that Black Panther got a nomination for Best Picture. Remember earlier in the year they had talked about maybe they'd create this weird kind of popular movie category.
Yeah. They're still threatening that they're going to do it for next year. They just got to work out the rules.
It's so strange because it mostly was for Black Panther, and Black Panther is a really good film. So I'm glad it got in just the regular category. It didn't have to have like an asterisk by it.
Well, this year, I mean, there's several wildly popular movies like Black Panther. There's Star is Born, which made like $200 million. Bohemian Rhapsody, which made like $200 million. Actually, Star is Born might have only made like 180. But you know what I mean?
Lot.
So, a lot of money. Hit. So there's a lot of movies that have made a ridiculous amount of money that are nominated this year.
Do you have a difference when you're looking at your year-end list? Do you differentiate between like your favorite movie of the year or the best movie of the year? Or is it just kind of combined?
That's interesting that you ask. I think it's something journalists always really have to think about for those year-end lists. We at The Plain Dealer, because we have several people who review movies, sort of do it as our favorite because each person picks their films. We don't like have a battle like this is the best, But it's interesting that you ask because there can be a difference there. And I think it's hard for a critic to kind of like get outside themselves and say, this might be the best film of the year, but it wasn't, my favorite.
Right. Mm-hmm. I guess in my head, it's more of movies that take me by surprise. Like the first example off the top of my head would be when Boyhood came out. I'm a huge Richard Linklater fan. I thought that was the best American film of the year. But my favorite was Whiplash because I didn't expect anything out of that movie. And it just sort of, blew me away watching it, especially with that last like 13-minute drum solo that was I just wanted to start clapping in the theater, even though I was watching it by myself at 1 a.m. here.
That's okay. You can be a crazy person. That's okay.
Because I noticed on the article that you guys published at The Plain Dealer of like the year-end review, you had some great kids movies included on there too, which I didn't see getting a ton of love on other critics' lists, which was nice to see. Incredibles 2 and was it Peter Rabbit?
Peter Rabbit. Also? I thought that was so funny. Yeah. Now, if we had been doing like just the best movie of the year list, I probably would have put Incredibles 2 on it. Don't know if Peter Rabbit, that might have been like 12, 13. But so that was definitely more like kind of those lists were sort of our favorites. But Incredibles 2, I think, is a great animated film. I think that could be a best picture. I mean, if animated films were in there, it is up for best animated feature. I mean, it's just really smart and witty, and adults you could go as an adult and see it without a kid. I mean, you don't have to be a kid.
I did. Yeah. I actually, if I don't see them in advance of like the trade screenings in the morning where there are no children usually, then I have to wait for the animated movies to have been out for a while, and then I go to either the latest show possible and try to minimize the kids. Especially for like a Disney movie like that. That's probably our like little kids that are maybe chatting too much and they can't quite understand exactly how to act yet in public, kind of thing. So I have to kind of put my child shield around me at the theater.
As someone with a couple kids that like taking to the movies a lot. On occasion, when I'll go when they're at school, if it's something they weren't interested in Spider-Verse for some reason. Eventually,
shame on them.
I convinced them to go, and I took them. But when I went, I get the hearing-assisted headphones, and that way you have your own volume, and then you don't hear all the kids talking and chatting all around you.
When he told me that before, I'm like, I'd never thought of that. Yeah, that is such a good idea to just kind of drown out and be in your little world. It's also just a good
tip in general because we have really good ones here at the theater. So if you don't want to hear just even adults whispering to themselves, just ask for the headphones, and then it blocks it out.
And you usually buy the kids a lot of snacks, keep them from talking because they're just eating that candy and crunching.
Right. Do you get through the previews with your kids still eating snacks? Because mine are they're done by the time the previews are done with most of their...
I have one daughter who's 11, and so she knows the rules. If mom's reviewing a film, mom can't get up for any reason. So it's like you have to pace yourself. Right. So, no more snacks.
I have an 8 and 11-year-old, and the 11-year-old's a little bit better about sitting still and or just he'll take a nap because he gets bored.
I have a friend who has the best system on earth where he doesn't. He puts his popcorn down on the floor and he does not pick it up until the movie actually starts. And I'm like, you're the only person I've ever seen that is smart enough to have figured that out, because it's true. I usually get the little bag and it will be mostly gone. All right, totally off topic.
That's right.
There we go. I like that we talked
theater
about
etiquette.
Yeah, theater etiquette and popcorn consumption.
How to make your popcorn last.
Exactly. Pace yourself.
Did you have a movie that maybe the Academy didn't look at all or didn't get much love, or something, smaller film that you'd like to champion that people should catch up with?
Well, I was just talking with Dave here about The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which is up for adapted screenplay.
And a song. It got song nomination too. Yeah. Right. The one song.
I love that film. I thought that was a great witty film, full of the Coen brothers, sort of their wicked humor, but also the humanity that they have in their films and the pathos. Probably it's for adapted screenplay because, just it went right to Netflix, which I thought was really odd for a Coen Brothers film.
Yeah. Wow.
And also, the format of it, where it's like distinct tales that were not really linked, except for they were supposed to be all Old West tales. But I really thought that was one of the best films of the last year, and one of my favorite.
I guess I didn't realize that was adapted. So is that like a previously published collection of stories?
I think it's a collection of stories, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know who, probably, no, it doesn't. I don't have in front of me who the original author was. But that was one of those ones where we had wanted to play it, and Netflix wouldn't let us play it. They just are trying to be very protective of their properties, and even though they're getting a lot of marquee titles, obviously with Roma and Buster Scruggs and the new Martin Scorsese film and the new Dan Gilroy movie that's going to be coming out soon. So there's a lot of stuff that they're playing that theatrically we would love to be showing, and we are hoping they'll let us, but it's out of our control.
I did read that they did so well with Roma, with it being both in the theaters and on Netflix, that they might have more theatrical releases in the future, because they're seeing that doesn't really cut into their
I think that
bottom line.
I mean, quite frankly, they're just leaving money on the table for some of these films, and if they don't release their grosses of what Roma did, but obviously we know how well it did at our theater, and it's done very well here. So we can assume that it's done very well other places. And
it's probably going to get a pretty good bump, since all the reporting is it's like Roma and I think The Favorite are tied as like 10 nominations each. So maybe if they do a big award sweep, we'll see more Netflix on the big screen, because I would rather see a Coen Brothers movie, obviously, on a big screen than
Western too. Yeah.
Although, as Dave's mentioned on the podcast over the weeks, watching screeners at home on his laptop with headphones in versus seeing it in the theater, I find it amazing that I haven't caught up with Buster Scruggs yet, but I find it amazing that people that I talk to that see it are like, no, it's amazing. Like, just even getting that experience on their laptop or their TV in their living room, it's still such a powerful film that it works.
Well, but weirdly, I actually did get to see Buster Scruggs in the theater.
Okay, I'm not talking about you then.
That was one that they actually had a press screening of. Yeah. And I'm fascinated when Netflix will press screen a movie for critics sometimes and be like, we acknowledge that this is how the film should be seen, but then
click play at home.
But don't. The general audience isn't going to have that kind of access.
Sure.
And for Roma, I know you didn't get to see one of the press screenings in the theater, right? Is that
I did
correct?
not know.
But we did have at least. Sometimes they have very specific press screenings, like this one's only for members of the Broadcast Film Critics Association, or this one's only for this critic because this guy is going to a junket out for whatever to do an interview. So they did screen it a few times for different things. And I got to see that for one of those screenings. So I'm glad that they let us just play Roma for the general audience and not just elitists like me that got to see it in the theater, that other people had access.
And whatever downside of things being on Netflix, I mean, I think the film lovers need to be grateful to Netflix, because as you know, it's so hard to fund movies these days. I mean, big directors have a hard time. And here's a company, working with big directors and giving them the money to make really great films, And I'm sure the directors are all very happy about this.
Well, I think that my only problem with Netflix is that there'll be an initial push for something and it's there, but then it's just lost in that sea of content on there, and you don't see it anymore. You forget that these things exist. Whenever Velvet Buzzsaw comes out in a couple of weeks for the new Dan Gilroy movie, I'm very excited about. I hope we get to show it in the theater. I don't know that we will. Who knows? But that's one that, if I forget to watch it when it debuts, I'm going to forget that it existed, and I got
to write it down.
I know.
They do have a built-in queue system there, but I'm also totally guilty of, by the time I go to get to the queue tab, I've already been distracted by 4 other titles that I didn't know were up. So,
and since I watch things on, sometimes I'll have the Roku going, or the TiVo, or just the smart TV, and every one of those platforms, Netflix looks different on every one of those platforms. Okay. So the content finding it's not in the same places. It doesn't look the same. It's very strange that it's not a uniform kind of thing.
There was an article, I want to say a couple of days ago, that they always announced for 2019 they were planning on spending, I think it was $15 billion on content or some crazy amount, which, like you said, that's got to just look like a cash waterfall for filmmakers. I need to get into some of that Netflix money, because it seems like they're not that classic studio thing where they're overlooking every aspect of production. You're kind of like, here's the money, give me a movie. Yeah. Go make it.
And Amazon Prime, has been doing that, but they're moving a little more mainstream now. So it seems like Amazon is going to fill that void where they'll actually give money to art directors and indie filmmakers.
Yeah, I mean, they did. Amazon produced the Suspiria remake, and Cold War is an Amazon film. Yeah. So I mean, they've absolutely
I think it's really Amazon films. Ted Hope from Good Machine and all the 90s independent stuff. He's been kind of steering that film ship there, which you can kind of tell with their focus on a lot of the indie stuff the last couple of years. Manchester by the Sea and Big Sick.
Yeah. So, I mean, for filmmakers, the world has changed, but there are some upsides to it.
And we even get into TV nowadays, too. So there's plenty of ways to get
too much.
Not enough time to watch everything.
There's not enough time to watch everything.
Well, Laura, thank you very much for stopping by today. Is there a place you want to direct people digitally to find more of your writings and books?
Yeah, you can look at the Plain Dealer, especially on Fridays and Sundays for movie reviews and features. Cleveland.com/entertainment will have our movie coverage. If you're interested in the books, you can go to facebook.com/Lost Cleveland, and I like to share lots of vintage pictures of things, and as well as just talk about book events. And they can write to me too at the Plain Dealer, share their movie ideas.
All right. And we'll put all the links in the show notes, too. So if you're listening to this, just look down at your device and click the links necessary. And thanks again for stopping by.
Oh, thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Laura.
Next week's episode, we will be discussing the Oscar-nominated shorts programs that will be open at the theater, the live-action, animated, and documentary. And to reflect on that, our Cedarly 3 picks will be filmmakers who started out their feature film career by being nominated for an Academy Award for their short film. As always, thank you for tuning in to Cedarly Radio and lending us your ears this week. All the music heard on the show is original music written by Grant Heineman and performed by the New Heights Jazz Ensemble, used with their permission, of course. Visit clevelandcinemas.com for correct showtimes and to purchase advance tickets. Also, there are links in the show notes. You can use those if you'd like as well. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Cedarly Theater, spelled with an R-E at the end because we're fancy like that. Don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcast, and while you're subscribing, leave us a rating and review. Or better yet, tell a fellow film geek about the show. We'll see you at the movies.